On a sweltering August afternoon in 1921, a man in a black suit sat peacefully in a porch swing in Birmingham, Alabama, unaware that his life was about to end in a hail of gunfire. The victim was not a criminal or a politician, but a man of God, and his only sin in the eyes of his killer was a simple act of love performed behind the closed doors of a cathedral. As the sun dipped low over the city of iron and smoke, the echoes of 3 revolver shots would ignite a firestorm of religious hatred and racial tension that would leave a permanent scar on the American South. This is the story of a holy man, a forbidden marriage, and a justice system that turned its back on a martyr. Before we dive deeper into this tragic chapter of history, remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Calendar of Crime. Your support helps us bring these forgotten stories to light, ensuring that the lessons of the past are never truly lost. Now, let us carry on with the story of Father James Coyle and the day that Birmingham stood still. The year was 1921, and Birmingham was a city caught in the grip of a fever. The Ku Klux Klan was no longer a shadow in the woods. It was a dominant force in the halls of power, fueled by a virulent blend of anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant, and white supremacist rhetoric. In the heart of this storm stood Father James E. Coyle, an Irish-born priest who had become a pillar of the local Catholic community. Known for his sharp intellect and unwavering compassion, Coyle was a man who refused to be intimidated by the rising tide of bigotry, even as the hooded shadows grew longer across the city he called home. Among those who harbored a deep-seated hatred for the Catholic Church was the Reverend Edwin R. Stevenson, a Methodist minister who spent his days officiating at the local courthouse. Stevenson was a man of rigid convictions and a member of the Klan, but his greatest source of pride, and eventually his greatest source of rage, was his daughter, Ruth. For years, Ruth had lived under the thumb of her father's strict religious views. But in secret, she had begun to seek out a different path, one that would lead her directly into the arms of the very faith her father despised. Ruth's rebellion was not just one of spirit, but of heart. She had fallen in love with Pedro Guzman, a Puerto Rican man who worked as a paperhanger and was a devoted Catholic. Their romance was a dangerous secret in a time and place where interracial relationships were viewed with suspicion, and Catholic marriages were seen as a threat to the Protestant establishment. For months, they met in the shadows, their love growing stronger, even as the risk of discovery loomed over them like a gathering storm. The tension reached a breaking point on the morning of August 11th, 1921. Ruth, having recently converted to Catholicism in secret, met Pedro at St. Paul's Cathedral. There, in the quiet sanctity of the church, Father Coyle performed the marriage ceremony that would seal their fate. It was a simple act of pastoral duty, but in the racially charged and religiously divided atmosphere of Birmingham, it was a declaration of war against the status quo. Father Coyle knew the risks, yet he chose to stand by the young couple, believing that love and faith should transcend the barriers of hate. Word of the marriage reached Reverend Stevenson later that afternoon, and the news shattered his world. Blinded by a toxic mixture of religious zealotry and racial fury, he armed himself with a revolver and marched toward the St. Paul's rectory. He didn't see a man of God. He saw a conspirator who had stolen his daughter's soul and tainted his family's bloodline. The walk to the rectory was short, but for Stevenson, it was a crusade to reclaim his honor through blood. Father Coyle was sitting in a swing on the rectory porch, enjoying a brief moment of respite from the Alabama heat, when Stevenson arrived. There were no long arguments or dramatic pleas. Without a word, Stevenson drew his weapon and fired 3 times at point-blank range. The priest, caught entirely off guard, collapsed as the life drained out of him on the wooden boards of his own home. The shooter didn't flee. Instead, he walked calmly to the courthouse, where he worked and surrendered, claiming he had done what any father would do. The murder sent shockwaves through the nation, but in Birmingham, the battle was just beginning. The Ku Klux Klan immediately rallied to Stevenson's defense, turning the trial into a circus of propaganda. They hired 5 of the city's most prominent lawyers, including Hugo Black, a man who would one day sit on the United States Supreme Court. The defense strategy was as cynical as it was effective. They argued that Stevenson was temporarily insane, driven to madness by the outrage of his daughter marrying a Catholic man of color. During the trial, the courtroom became a stage for the Klan's ideology. The defense focused less on the act of murder and more on the threat of Catholicism and the sanctity of the white Protestant family. They even went so far as to darken the lights in the courtroom to make Pedro Guthisman's skin appear darker, leaning into the jury's deepest prejudices. It was a masterclass in manipulation, designed to convince the all-white, all-Protestant jury that the real victim was the man holding the gun, not the priest lying in the grave. The verdict, when it finally came, was a devastating blow to the concept of justice. Despite the cold-blooded nature of the crime and the clear evidence of premeditation, the jury found Edwin Stevenson not guilty by reason of insanity. The courtroom erupted in cheers, and the Klan celebrated it as a victory for their cause. For the Catholic community and the family of Father Coyle, it was a bitter reminder that in the eyes of the law in 1921 Alabama, some lives were worth far less than others. Father James Coyle's legacy did not end with the verdict. His death became a rallying cry for those fighting for religious freedom and civil rights in the South. Over the decades, he has been remembered as a martyr who gave his life for the simple belief that all people, regardless of their background or faith, have the right to love and worship as they choose. The St. Paul's Cathedral still stands today, a silent witness to the tragedy and a testament to the man who stood his ground against the darkness. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.